Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Overview and Scrutiny meeting. Before we get started, today is Holocaust Memorial Day, and it's a day to remember everyone who was murdered in the Holocaust under Nazi rule, and also the subsequent genocides which followed in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, and Darfur. I'd like to ask if we could just have a short period of silence just to reflect on that before we get started. Thank you. Okay, so item 1 is the minutes of the last meeting held on the 16th of December last year. Do any members have any comments they want to raise on those minutes? Seeing none, are members happy to approve those? Thank you very much. Second item, apologies and substitutes. Ruth, do we have any apologies and substitutes?
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Bushell, Councillor Kybird, Councillor Nairn, and we have Councillor Wilkinson present as a substitute. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3 is Chairman's announcements. I do have one announcement. You may recall last year we had a councillor call for action in respect of the Banham poultry issues. We have received an update from the Environment Committee, which I'll briefly read out to you on what's been happening since. They've said that this can be shared publicly, so I will read directly from the email we've received. With regards to the investigation by the Environment Agency, which are bringing charges in the Chelmsford Magistrates Court, which are currently listed for the 3rd of March 2022, the following charges have been filed. The first one is between the 16th of January 2019 and the 29th of September 2021, Banham Poultry 2018 Limited at Station Road, Attleborough, is alleged to breach condition 3.3.1 of the environmental permit in failing to keep activities free from odour at levels likely to cause pollution outside of the site, as perceived by an authorised officer of the Environment Agency, by failing to use appropriate measures to prevent, or where that is not practicable, to minimise the odour. This is contrary to Regulation 38.2 of the Environmental Permitting England and Wales Regulations 2016. The second charge that's been filed is that on the 8th of May 2021, Banham Poultry 2018 Limited of Station Road, Attleborough, is alleged to have failed to comply with the requirements of an enforcement notice dated 6th of April 2021, also issued under those regulations, and those steps in the notice were not taken. This was contrary to Regulation 38.3 of those aforementioned regulations. They've said they can't provide any further information until after the hearing. Obviously, the hearing is a public meeting in itself, so as soon as we have further updates, we'll provide them. But clearly, it's good to see that some steps are being taken on the matter, and that the residents are going to see, hopefully, some results. So that was all I had under Chairman's announcements. I have not been made aware of any items of urgent business under item 4. Declarations of interest, item 5. Are there any members who wish to declare an interest, pecuniary, personal, or otherwise? Seeing none, thank you. Item 6, non-members wishing to address the meeting. I've not been made aware of any non-members who specifically wish to address the meeting. I have a point from Councillor Burt. Tim?
Yes, Chairman, I was trying to get in just before the next one. So if you finished 6, between 6 and 7.
Is there an item between 6 and 7?
I would like to make a request. We haven't had any advance notice or any information on Agenda 9, the 2035 Sustainability Programme. And that is an important part of our budget considerations going on from now until we achieve net zero. So I'd like perhaps you to consider, perhaps we bring that one forward first before we consider the budget one.
So firstly, I think that's a point that could have been made under item 7. I'm not going to reorder the agenda for that point. I think we have the facts of the budget before us to scrutinise. If you would like to ask questions pertaining to the sustainability update and how that might affect the budgetary position, then you are of course welcome to do so, and that is what this item is here for. But I'm going to proceed in the order that is scheduled on the agenda. So, yes, so as I was saying, sorry, I don't know of any non-members who wish to address the meeting on any other items, although as usual, non-members are welcome to address under any of the items if they wish to. Item 7 is the draft budget. I believe Councillor Cowan has a spiel to present to start with, and then of course we can begin the catechism.
Shall I begin, Chairman?
Please do.
I am. So colleagues, the draft budget medium-term planning capital strategy that is before us today was presented to Cabinet on January the 10th. It is testament to the diligent work that Team Breckland has undertaken during the pandemic, and particularly over the last 12 months. It builds upon this Council's prudent fiscal management that I have been reporting for the past 2 years. You have before you a simple recommendation today that the draft capital and revenue budget estimates, the draft medium-term financial plan, and the draft capital strategy are reviewed in preparation for the final budget setting in February 2022. In summary, I would draw your attention to the following key points. This is a balanced budget for the coming year, set against continued uncertainty around government funding, potential central policies and fees, and charging income streams. In order to maintain services, deliver on our core strategies and initiatives, and support residents and businesses, the budget contemplates a proposed increase in council tax for a Band D property of £4.95 per year, less than 10p increase per week. Following this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission, the final budget proposals will be put before Cabinet and full Council in February. Looking ahead, whilst the papers before you reflect the draft local government settlement, they are relatively silent on future trends, but there is no doubt that we shall face challenges in the future as a result of widely trailed central government policies surrounding, for example, recycling provisions in the Environment Bill. Similarly, there is a significant risk associated with the National Non-Domestic Rate, NNDR, and its reset that will change the baseline funding level. And the team has identified this risk in the budget preparations as having an impact in either years 23-24 or 24-25 and perhaps beyond. Similarly, whilst there is no suggestion of an imminent fair funding review, this is anticipated in the 25-26 fiscal year. Government has provided a further £830,000 of new homes bonus, NHB, and this has been posted to the Inclusive Growth Reserve to enable us to maintain delivery of projects and programmes. As a result of the continuing impact of COVID-19, the Council amended and refined efficiency requirements. As a result of that, the Evolve programme has been developed that will help to offset the anticipated budget deficits in the immediate future. And these are enunciated on page 16 of your pack. With regards to the capital programme, there is an identified need to borrow over the medium term, but this is offset through the repayment mechanism from savings in the waste contract. Thus, the borrowing requirement is in effect nil over the medium term. We do face risks, and these have been articulated as follows. The NNDR reset with a potential impact of £1.229 million per year. The Environment Bill, a potential impact of between £1.5 and £3.5 million a year. Recovery of housing benefit through migration to universal credit, and benchmarking reviews within the PFI scheme. Details are contained in the appendices attached to these papers, and Alison Chubbuck, Assistant Director and Section 151 Officer, is with us today to assist in answering any detailed questions. To conclude, this draft budget is based on the following principles. Breckland has no reliance on NHB funding. Breckland can and will maintain service delivery. Breckland will continue to invest in our priorities: thriving places, Breckland 2035, working smarter, and inspiring communities. Breckland has reserves that will be used to provide financial support for projects that lead to growth and investment and/or achieve savings or income. Breckland has put in place an achievable efficiencies programme to assist in the management of future funding changes and financial risks. And finally, I'm delighted to advise that Breckland has increased the council tax hardship fund by a further £35,000 this year. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Tim?
So I've got questions in 4 areas. So do you want to take this just one at a time?
Yes.
Yes. Following on from my request earlier, I mean, climate, net zero 2030. There's a little tiny bit in there about the Evolve programme looking at solar renewable energy, but where is our funding to reduce our carbon impact? I mean, we have some very big carbon outputs from this council, and I can't see that we are putting money aside for the big projects that we need to bring forward, or we're even looking at them or identifying them. So can you show me in there where we're actually looking at our longer term 2035 obligations?
Thank you, Tim, and thank you for that question. Well, we have with us today on my left, Councillor Sherwood, who is the portfolio holder responsible for that part of the budget. And of course, Alison, who actually puts the number crunching together based on information that the team provides her. So I'm not going to answer that detailed question. I will ask either Ian on my left or Alison over there to take the lead. Thank you, Chairman.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. First of all, if I could start by saying Greg Pearson, the Assistant Director and the Head of Strategic Policy, including the sustainability policy, is unable to be with us this morning. He is unfortunately unwell. He became unwell yesterday. But I'm pleased to have with me Steve James, the Executive Director, who is seated behind you, Councillor Burr. So Steve and I will take questions and answer them the best we can. And if there's detailed questions we're unable to answer, we'll refer that back so we can come back to you. So in short, in response to your question, you know that Breckland set aside a large budget to look at the whole sustainability and green agenda. And the whole part of that, or a big part of that, was making sure that we had a base level to start at. And I can assure you, we're working on our buildings and what can be done. And we will be coming forward. And like many of these things, there are fundings that you can draw in. So we're pulling all that information together. And I'm confident that we will be able to work towards the outcomes that both you and I want. If Steve wanted to come in with any additional information, or Alison with any budget line information, I'll leave that to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so just to build on what Councillor Sherwood said, the council set aside £500,000 in its reserve to undertake evidence-based analysis of our buildings and our carbon footprint, for example, and also to set aside money to enable some of that to be translated into action on our own buildings. The Evolve programme, our efficiency programme, also has a strand looking at solar and renewables as well. So there's potential money there to invest in. And we're, of course, working with partners to look at how they can reduce their carbon footprint. So there is money set aside. And as Councillor Sherwood said, the evidence base we're gathering will hopefully enable us to attract external funding through government sources to enable us to reduce our carbon footprint.
Tim, do you want to come back on? Oh, sorry, Phil.
If I can come back as well on that very point. I think the clue is in the title. We're looking at draft budget setting, particularly for next year. But as it says, medium-term financial plan and capital strategy. I think we're in 2022 at the moment, and therefore aiming for 2030, 2035 as a time frame takes us beyond the medium term in that sense. But there are specifics within the medium-term plan that you can see, such as the Evolve programme, in which this particular programme is embedded. And there are some set aside in the Evolve programme if you're here to look at the papers. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim, do you want to come back?
On that particular point, yes, I recognise that we are looking at slightly longer term, but we can't kick this can down the road. We have to actually start putting these together now and proper funding. Yes, I accept that the Evolve programme is looking at it, but it's kind of scratching the surface. We need to be quantifying our carbon. We need to quantify what we've got to achieve, and start putting that together now. Otherwise, we're going to run out of time. So I hear what I've been told, but I don't think that we are acting quickly enough or going far enough.
Understood. Ian.
Councillor Burt won't be surprised to hear that I totally disagree. I think we are looking at it, and we have made the commitment. We've made a big commitment, one of the biggest commitments of any councils across Norfolk. We are looking at all of this, and we are moving forward. So I didn't want a single voice to be heard, because it's not the voice that I recognise. The voice that I recognise about what this Brecon Council is doing about sustainability and the green agenda and net zero 35 is a very positive and forward-thinking campaign. So I'm just want to track that. Thank you.
We have it on record, and no doubt we'll go into more detail under item 9 as well. So thank you for that. Before I go to Tim's second of his 4 tranches, are there any other members who'd like to ask a question? Otherwise, I have one. Terry.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 2 questions, if you like, and probably a couple of points thrown in there too. Firstly, just to say thank you for the briefing that opposition leaders had, and also I was able to attend Cabinet, so my questions and points are muted somewhat, because this is the 3rd time that I've been discussing the Cabinet report and the agenda. And also just to say it's refreshing for me. One of my tasks this week was to read the Cabinet papers and budget report for Norfolk County Council. And it's like night and day, to be honest with you. It's, you know, if you want to be depressed, have a good read of that, because it's, you know, it's very worrying. So it's pleasing to see things not quite so stark, frankly, when I look at the Brecon budget papers. The 2 points I wanted to make, and sort of follow on from comments I made at Cabinet. One is in relation to the hardship fund, and Phil's alluded to that today. Obviously very encouraging that that's now been topped up. Many of us, I'm sure, over the last week or so have been encouraging residents to apply for the household support fund, which was alluded to at council last week. And that's given me at least an opportunity. It's not scientific, but I've been able to say to people, are you aware of the support that may be available with council tax? And nearly always people are saying no. So I think the review of the hardship support fund for council tax specifically is quite important, because we need to make sure we are helping the right people. If they're not affording to pay their gas and electric and struggling with food, council tax, I'm sure, will be low on their list, frankly, and probably not paying that. So we need to make sure that that support is relevant. And I wonder if Phil had given any more thought to that from when I raised it at the Cabinet meeting. The other point is around food waste, and it does link in quite nicely with the sustainability agenda, because the point I made at Cabinet is we are moving towards food waste collection service universal down the line in a few years' time. We've been doing a lot of work in Thetford around food poverty and food waste, and you would be amazed at the volume of food that comes into surplus food that comes into the Charles Burrell Centre and goes out again through the Burrell shop, and you know, it baffles me how much food supermarkets particularly put in the bins, you know, perfectly good food, and then obviously, you know, what individuals and companies give away. And I would really like us to be doing more to combat food waste and actually start educating people around, what you can and can't do with food waste, and stop, frankly, perfectly good food from going into people's bins. That the cost in terms of finance is one aspect, but also that the carbon cost alone from the food production and then the disposal is significant. And I just wonder what flexibility there might be in the budget to find some money to run a bit of a pilot for a food waste reduction officer. I read the little newsletters that we get from the LGA and others, and there's some really good examples around the country where there are food waste reduction officers that go into parish councils and schools and actually work with people to educate them about best before and use by, and basically how to be sensible and with our food. That would seem to me like a really good intervention and relatively cheap over the next 2 years as we approach food waste collections through our wheelie bins. And if I was to suggest one improvement today that I would personally like to make to the budget, it would be for a food waste reduction officer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Terry. Yes, you did ask that first question about hardship and support. So I actually went back to my own filing system at home. And guess what? This is last year's council tax bill. And within last year's council tax bill is this document from ARP. And in that document, it says council tax reduction. Council tax reduction is a reduction to your council tax bill available to some people on low income. The scheme is run by local councils and the reductions differ between councils. If you think you may qualify, please apply online, and it gives a web link for that. So in terms of fairly obvious ways of approaching how people may question their council tax and whether they can afford to pay it, that went out with every council tax leaflet. On the back of the council tax bill, there's a whole screed here, and it says, "Are you behind?" for instance, and if you get behind, contact us. So from a very obvious perspective, we are doing that. The website also enables people to log on if they're able to do so. All of us ward members as well are there to represent the people, and good for you, Terry, that you're able to deal with people in your ward in that way, and that's part of our day job as councillors. But I'm aware that ARP are very conscious of rising prices, of the cost of living changing a bit more than people anticipated a year and a half ago, to say the least. And I know that Alison's been in touch with them, and they are proposing to do more in the way of hardship funding and looking at that more constructively. Beyond that, I can't disagree with anything you say, but I think we're actually doing probably about as much, both in formal terms through leafleting in that way, the website, and as ward members to be able to advise those whom we represent.
And just before I let Terry come back, do you want to address the food waste
I can do.
officer?
Very good. So of course, it's long been, as I've been a councillor for almost too many years now, it's long been a cry that we ought to think about food waste. It's becoming more and more relevant now in many ways, I suppose. But one of the things that we as a council have tried to do through our education programmes, informally and sometimes formally, is to encourage people not to waste food, not to buy too much. And Linda sitting opposite, and I can remember Linda standing up effectively and really banging the drum for people to think about what they buy and how they buy it and what they do with it. And rather than, I suppose, in a curious way, encourage people to think about what can we do with our food waste, is to avoid getting it there in the first place, which is fundamental. And I don't disagree that people, sometimes people need a little bit more education to get there, which is why we have the food bus, of course, which is now set to run around the district. And if we can afford a food waste reduction officer, that's something we may well think about. But right now in this budget, we don't have it. There are other priorities that we have in our core strategies, those that I enunciated in my introduction. But life continues and goes on, moves forward, and budgets are meant to be flexible. And as a result of that, it's something we can look at, I'm sure. But I would stress that at the moment, it doesn't form part of our core strategy in the budget papers before you. But I'm sure if you wish to put a case forward, Terry, we'll listen to it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah, just specifically on the hardship grant, and I thank Phil for his comments, because I personally had missed that there was specific reference in the council tax bill, and I'm quite sure other people are too. Something that's really struck me in the last week is the extent to which actually an awful lot of people were reasonably well off last April and March when they received their council tax bill. But the household support grant is specifically in response to the cost of living issues and changes to universal credit and the end of furlough, which really have only happened in the last few months. And I would have to have a very good memory to go all the way back to my bill last April. So I do think we need to be doing some reminder to communications and reminding people to look at their council tax bill and look up the support that's available through our comms. I had a really interesting case this week. I had a chap ring me up and asked for the household support fund. He'd been advised to call me from the job centre. And I thought, thank you very much. I've got enough of my own casework, but you're sending a few more my way. And I said, do you have the internet? And he says, no, I can't afford the internet. Well, of course you wouldn't. And I said, that's fine. So could you pop into my office and I'll do it with you. I said, where are you from? And he said, I'm from Caston. And I had to look it up because I wasn't quite sure where it was. And it's actually in your ward, Phil. And he said to me, he's on heating oil, not even sort of gas and electric and such. But he was explaining to me that he's only recently lost his job. And actually, that's what the issue is now. He wasn't in an issue 6 months ago. Anyway, so I put him through the system. But actually, things do change. And so my point is around the hardship grant is actually we've got to keep it in real time because situations can change quite quickly.
Thank you. Phil.
Well, thanks for letting me know. I had a ward member in my ward who had a problem because he hadn't spoken to me, Terry, which is, I think, a shame because that's what we're there for as ward members. And it's not as if I don't attend Caston Parish Council meetings on a regular basis either. And my name is in the Waylander magazine, which goes out to every single household in the ward. But thank you for letting me know. If you can tell me his details, I'll make sure we keep up on top of that. Thank you.
And Linda.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to follow up on Phil's comment. Those of us that are in parishes or wards where we're fortunate to have a magazine, my colleague and I, we put something in every month, whether it's a reminder about council tax reduction, because for many people who perhaps have a mental illness, they don't realise they can get a discount or even it free. We put in reminders about grants that are available and as much as we can to help the everyday citizen look at it. We can't make them read it. It's the same with leaflets in envelopes. You can put the information out there, you can't make people read it. But as ward members, again, we run a village forum every so often with certain topics, and people can drop in if we've got something specific like food waste or the green agenda. We'll invite maybe our county councillor to come along, and it's about disseminating that information. It's there. Sometimes you think even if I had it stamped on my head, people still wouldn't read it. It's an onward battle, but we have to persevere. So, thank you.
Thank you. Tim, let's go to your second.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I move us on to page 26 and the table on top there? Now, I did pose some questions at Cabinet on this, and well, respect to Councillor Cowan, you were quite candid that you weren't as familiar as you wanted to be about tax base and why the cost of living increase was set at 2%. Since we've had a bit of time, I just wondered whether you might be able to fill in a bit more detail on that. So why have we set the cost of living increase at 2% for the years 22-23 when we've got inflation at 5.5%, we've got the national insurance increases just around the corner. It seems too low a figure in our projection. And then on the tax base, on the bottom row, you'll see that we've gone from the first column to the second. So from this current year to the 2022-23 prediction has risen by 600, which is kind of what you would expect at the level of house building that we're performing. But when you move on to subsequent years, the 3 subsequent years, so from 2022 to 2026, it's only increasing by about 300 per year. And I can't fathom out why that would be. I wonder whether you've had a chance to drill down into a bit more detail and could help.
Thank you, Tim. And I'm quite sure where to begin, really. I thought the answer was given last time quite easily. So the 2% cost of living increase, that's the government and Bank of England target, and that's the figure that we work with. Yes, it may go up, but it also goes down. And we can't predict what's going to happen in the coming years either. As far as the tax base is concerned, the tax base is assessed, as I think was explained quite well, on the basis of a Band D property. And 75% of houses in Brecland are in bands A, B, and C. And therefore, the mathematical equation which delivers the tax base numbers is based on the number of houses that are built or projected to be built, based on information given to the planning team by the house builders who build the houses. We don't make the figures up. And as a result, it averages out at the Band D level. So hence the figures going forward are as they are. They're not based on actual house building numbers, because let's face it, in the future, we don't know how many are going to be built. These figures are based on projections that are given to our team by those who actually physically build the houses. As far as this year's tax base, that's based on reality and the number of houses that have been built, and based on the average number of Band D properties. That's why the figures look different from the housing targets that were set. Because when we're given a target, let's pluck a figure out of the air of 758 houses, they're not all Band D. Some of them might be Band E. The vast majority are going to be in bands B and C probably. And that's why, whilst we might have a target of, let's say, 758, there's only 600, because the average is down to the Band D numbers. I thought that was made quite clear, Chairman, at our last meeting when we discussed this, but I'm sure that those officers in the room who have the detailed knowledge can perhaps add more meat on those bones. Thank you.
If I could, for the members who weren't at that previous meeting, just in relation to your answer on the cost of living increase. So can I confirm, obviously we went through a period of very low inflation. Was it our position, and I should know this, obviously having thoroughly read every budget for time immemorial, but was it our position that we always had a 2% cost of living increase in previous years?
Sorry, Chairman, if you look at the current year, it's 2%, but Alison has the background figures on all those. But yes, I would agree with your assessment there.
Very good, thank you. Tim, do you want to come back?
Just because we've done something at 2% before, surely doesn't mean that we have to do that now when there's other evidence. We should base that upon the evidence that we've got. But anyway, okay, that's what you've done is you've described here how the budget has been prepared. So fair enough if that's actually how the budget's been prepared, but I'm asking that perhaps as part of the review, which is what we're asking today to happen, is for these figures to be reviewed, that is taken into account within the review. On the tax base, it's interesting. So are we saying that we've been building lots of very high value houses in the last year, which have just come on, and then we're only going to be building Band A houses from now on? It doesn't. It's the
if I stop you there, Tim, because I see what your point is. So, Alison, if I could just borrow your expertise for a second. Firstly, as the 151 officer, you are in charge of the assumptions used in the budget, and both of these questions fall within the assumptions used. Could you, in layman's terms, explain the justification for maintaining a 2% cost of living increase across the variable inflation periods that we've had and will have in the future? And I think Phil's already alluded to the Bank of England inflation target, but if you're able to expand on that slightly. And secondly, could you explain the differential between the tax base for the current year and then the projected tax base in future years across the medium-term strategy?
Thank you. Yeah, as Phil said, the 2% is an assumption. These are assumptions for setting a budget. It is not what may happen when the local pay review is looked at in March. But as an average, that is a good assumption, and historically, that's the average that has transpired throughout time. So it's a good assumption to use. It's a fair. The tax base is linked to property, but you can't link it to the number of houses built. It is affected by local council tax reduction scheme, which takes 92.5% out of tax base. It's affected by disabled exemptions. It's affected by single person discounts at 25%. You just can't link it to property. So that again is a reasonable assumption based on previous years as average.
Does that? I appreciate it's not the answer you wanted, but at least provides the thought behind the assumptions.
It does provide the thought behind the assumptions. I accept that.
Thank you. I will just ask my question, then we'll come back to your third topic area, unless other members indicate. My question is, so there has been some discussion in the media, and we don't know what the government will do around the national insurance increase potentially not going ahead. I wondered what would be the financial impact for the council if that were not to take place? And that may be an Alison question more than a Phil question.
It's a very interesting question, thank you. So in financial terms, it will be around £70,000 per year, but actually the government have given us a new grant this year, which is to offset the additional costs of that type of thing. So I'd like to say no effect on the budget, because I suspect if the national insurance rise doesn't come in place, then we won't get the associated grant.
Understood, thank you. Any other members with burning questions? Seeing none, Tim, topic 3.
Okay, let's revisit page 20. So I'm going to take a quote from Councillor Cowan's phrase book, and the table on there looks like a Woolworths pick and mix. Table, the naming appears wrong. If we're comparing district council taxes, then why are Yarmouth and Norwich not set at 0? So exactly what does this table show? Because it's certainly not what the text above it says. And why is it included in a budget report? Because it seems to be a political message rather than one on a factual basis of comparison. And incidentally, I do have the government figures for what a 2-person household pays in council tax for this year. And Great Yarmouth pay less than we do in Breckland.
I'm going to let the executive member come back on that question.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I also have the average council tax for the authority, excluding parish precepts and including special expenses schedule published by the government. And this is local authority by shire districts. And in column 1, Breckland is at the top of the list at £100.46. So that's a little bit more than the £98.73, because in this table, it includes those areas that pay special expenses. I have to tell you that in my council tax bill here, it's only £98.73. Okay. So as we look down this list, Great Yarmouth is costed at £171.48. Kingsland and West Norfolk at £149.32. North Norfolk at £153.72, and Norwich at £274.74. This is the Government Office of National Statistics page, which identifies, as I said earlier, the average council tax for the authority, excluding parish precepts and including special expenses, brackets band D, local authority by shire district. And that's how the government, not us as a council, defines this. So by the government's own description, those are the figures. Breckland £100.46, Great Yarmouth £171.48, and Norwich £274.74. So back to the table. The table is really there to identify that within Norfolk, because that's what this is about, the band D base tax for Breckland district is £98.73. It's as simple as that. We haven't manipulated the figures. They're lifted straight from the government national statistic table. That's what they are. And if you want some more detail, I'm sure Alison can fill you in and explain why it is that those figures are presented in this way. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, this has become an extremely boring topic. So I'm going to just check if Alison has anything she wants to add on that. Otherwise, we're going to move on from that because we've discussed it ad nauseum. And I think the positions with the various bits of paper that different people wield don't add a lot of value to the average resident in Breckland. Alison, is there anything you would like to add to that? No, thank you. Thank you, Tim, for your question. Thank you, Phil, for your answer. We'll move on to your final area of questioning, Tim.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, no, mine stay here. I get that power.
I've got the mic back. Thank you. Okay, so my final area to look at was one somewhat more general. We learned about some spending of the Market Towns initiative in Dereham, that money was being spent on public art and a clock, and in fact the clock has been cancelled, and that's been confirmed. And I am concerned that about what we are spending money from the public purse on. I am a great supporter of public art, so let's put that absolutely on the table. But usually, public art is paid for by a benefactor, not the public purse. And I'm worried that with the Market Towns initiative, if all we can come up with is to spend money on public art, would we not be better to pull some of that budget that was allocated last year back and distribute it more widely, perhaps for council tax support or for our programs for helping house homeless people?
Thank you, Phil.
Chairman, in this instance, I think I'd defer to my colleague on my left. I think, Martha, you're looking at things like the Hatch programme and others, are you not?
Phil said to his left, I thought he was pointing to Terry, but it does fall to me. But up until the mid last year, MTI did sit with myself, and I recognise what Tim is saying around expenditure. But the good thing about MTI, particularly supporting our town centres and our businesses in this most challenging of times, the projects that have been identified in the 5 market towns are led by local members. It's across all parties across the district. So the projects are being identified and worked upon and driven by local members. So I would suggest we're meeting local demand and trying to support our high streets and our town centres at the most difficult of times, where they was trading difficultly before the pandemic, and that has exacerbated the challenges they've been facing. So it's a local member-led across all parties project, and it's actually to be applauded because across the 5 market towns, they've been invented. And Tim, you referenced public furniture. We're blessed in Thetford with not 1 but 2 rivers running through our centre. It is the jewel upon which we will revive our retail offer and our leisure offer within the town. And significant work, I can only speak specifically to my town because I witness it every day. We now have public furniture engaging people. We're giving people reasons to come into our centre beyond retail, which I would believe we need to give people more reasons to enter into our town centres. We now have public furniture, chess tables, which is encouraging people of all age groups. In fact, I believe Councillor Jeremy has a relative who I daren't play at chess because he's rather good, who is part of that little group that now meet there. We have public table tennis where people are meeting. We have also addressed an antisocial behaviour issue within Thetford by the development of street lighting along this river corridor, bringing it into greater use.
I'm going to drag you back to the question, Mark.
I do
The
apologise.
question
I thought I
was,
answering
should
it.
we spend money on public art in Durham? And I think your answer is yes.
It's an
And the challenge from Tim was, were there better things we could be spending money on other than public art in Durham? And I think your answer is no, this is a member-led project in Durham. The people of Durham would like public art, and that is what this money will be spent on.
Chairman, in my first time as a councillor, I've been politely informed I've been long-winded. So
Bill, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yes, please, Chairman. I asked Mark to answer that question because when those initiatives were set up, to which Councillor Burt referred, it sat under Mark's portfolio. So it was appropriate that he gave the background to exactly why those programmes and projects are described. As members will know, it's Deputy Leader Councillor Clausen who now holds that particular portfolio. He's not here, so it seemed logical that Mark did that. I think it's very important to recognise, and if we were, for instance, to travel into Norwich, and I was in Cambridge not so long ago, they're fundamentally different cities from those which existed 3 years ago. They are still struggling to come out of the pandemic because their whole remit has been largely about either office-based workers who've been working from home or indeed retail trade. And the retail trade, as we know, has collapsed. It's the market towns across the country, and we have 5 of them in Brecon. It's the market towns which will help to rebuild the economy of this district. And we need to do what we can do in order to allow that to happen. And the best way of doing that is not to impose things on them as market towns. You know, if imposing stuff on people is probably the worst thing anyone could ever do. And this council has actually taken quite a different tack and has been engaging with those communities. That's the retail trade, with the chambers of commerce, with residents and other businesses to identify what they see as their strengths and weaknesses and their opportunities. And as a result of those discussions and those meetings, a programme of work has evolved and continues to evolve in all of our market towns and not just Durham. And the result of that is exactly what the document describes. It looks at how we can make those places more attractive because the residents, the businesses, and those who use them want them to thrive. And I think that rests the case, Jen.
Thank you. Fabian, and then I'll come back to Tim. Microphone.
It
Yes.
might be now. Yeah, just while we're adding facts onto that, just for the point of everyone's information, Durham is Norfolk's largest market town as a retail outlet. So it's there after Kings Lynn, Yarmouth and Norwich. So I think we've got that in Brecon. We need to keep that. That has to compete with everything else. The more we do to increase and draw footfall into that, the same as we do for each of our market towns, which are all unique, that's what we should be doing. And we should be looking at footfall, and anything to make them more attractive for people to come in needs to be done. And that is long-sightedness, not short-sightedness.
Tim.
I think you probably gathered my issue here is one of public perception at this time when so many people are suffering from a cost of living pressure and increase. And I think that's where it comes from. I would like to see, you know, if we continue along this, I'd like to see some very firm, hard evidence that shows that this does actually increase footfall, that there's a direct link between the two, if that is the argument for doing so.
Thank you. I'm not sure anyone has anything further to add on that point currently, so I think that's been well discussed. Are there any other questions from any members concerning the budget? Otherwise, we will release Phil. Terry.
Could you educate me, Chair, on process? We're reviewing the budget today and then it's going back to Cabinet. Would I be able to table an amendment or a proposal or do something that would effectively request that the Cabinet explore opportunities to recruit a food waste reduction officer and include that within the budget?
So I think your appropriate course of action would be to propose that as a proposal from Scrutiny to go to Phil, I think it would go directly to council, not back to cabinet. If the committee agrees with you, then that proposal will then be put as a recommendation from Scrutiny to council alongside the budget. Do I take that as a proposal?
Yes, I'm suitably educated and I will do that as you say.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder? I have two. Do I have anyone speaking in favour of this proposal? We've heard Terry's points already. I will let you speak again if you wish to make them further. Do we have anyone speaking against this proposal? Peter.
Yeah, I've sat here, Chairman, and listened to everything and the concept of public spending and that sort of thing. People forget the majority of the public, of the hard workers, go to work and earn a living, and they're the ones who balk at this. They're the ones who do look at saving. The majority of people I know do not waste food. The ones who don't seem to care, you'll never educate. So, and while I've got the microphone, Chairman, I'll just have to say as well about the Inspiring Communities programme. That is the precept as well. That is the perception of the public as well, that we need our town centres built up. The majority of people who speak to me and then said, oh, we went to see the wool trail the other week. You know, well, that's bringing people into the town.
Thank
right
you.
across the district.
Linda.
I don't want to be controversial. That's not me at all, is it? But am I right in thinking that when we're budget setting, the opposition parties have a right to put in an alternative budget?
They do.
Can I ask, have they done that?
You can.
I am asking that. Have you?
I don't believe that's the case, is it?
No, and if I can come back to it, I was just asking the question, Terry, is that process still in place that they do have a right to put in an alternative budget? Thank you.
Fabian.
We're there. I just think that we're taking it the wrong angle on a food reduction waste officer, because it's not the waste is the biggest part of what, as you say, our residents create. It is the overstocking by the supermarket. So I commend what Terry does, but most of his comes for his place from the supermarkets. It's the supermarkets and the other suppliers, most of which is important. And is there anyone's there aware that a lot of the biomass plants run on bananas that come straight into this country and then go straight to a biomass plant? So if there's waste, I think the education has got to start at the top end, because what we're doing is minimal. And if there was any expenditure, I'd like to see it directed at the suppliers and the supermarkets about correcting things. But I think Terry's already headed that off in Thetford with what he's doing with the Charles Burrell.
Thank you. Tim.
I think we're drilling down too much into the detail here. If I've understood it correctly,
Sorry,
Terry.
sorry, Tim, can I just check? Did you just say we might be drilling too much into the detail?
Yep, I sure did.
I just wanted to make sure I'd heard that correctly.
I think Terry's proposal was that he was able to make a suggested amendment. He didn't actually make a particular amendment. In this case, it's the principle behind making that. Am I correct in that?
The wording was for Cabinet to investigate and to look into it. You know, I don't want to be, I don't know how much we'd pay a food waste reduction officer, and I don't know what budget we'd take it from at this moment in time. But I think Cabinet, the message I would like to send from Scrutiny is that we're asking Cabinet to look into this for the budget.
Noting, of course, it goes to council. Okay, fine. I think we've heard enough. I'm going to look for votes in favour, please, of that proposal. Please raise your hands. That is 3. Votes against, please. Please raise your hand. That is 4, and that motion has fallen. In that case, could I ask, are Scrutiny happy to send the draft budget as it is following our scrutinising to council? All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? 2. Excellent. I wonder how you'll vote at council. Thank you. That has passed. So thank you everyone for your questioning. That was a much better budget debate than we've had previously at Scrutiny. So I'm pleased about that. We will release Phil. Thank you. Unless you want to hang around for some of the other items, you're welcome to stay. And we'll move on to item 8, which is the Q3 performance report. Mark, are you kicking that off?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased to bring forward the Q3 performance report to the Commission today. This is the first time the new suite of indicators are being discussed at this Commission, and I take the opportunity to thank members for their work and their feedback as part of this process. What colleagues will note is there are some gaps within this report, which Ryan will explain in a moment or two. The reasons we have brought this report in its current state is we felt it was important that the Commission could carry out its scrutiny role as soon as possible after the end of the quarter. And with the next meeting of this Commission not scheduled until March, it made sense to bring this report forward today rather than discuss performance from October in March. Q3 saw strong performance from both our planning and statutory information team, who performed at or above their target for this quarter. Colleagues will note that under the customer contact indicator, we have included wait times and abandonment rates for that quarter. Whilst it's always disappointing to not be performing at the target in this area, it is encouraging to see continued improvement from the service. Whilst there is still work to do, this fits with our projection that improvement will be seen gradually in this service as a result of the service review last year. Colleagues will also note that Appendix B in their packs relates to COVID-based performance for the Council, as well as providing an update on the current state of the district. The inclusion of this information is due to the Council's commitment to COVID work and its corporate plan, and it therefore makes sense to bring this forward now alongside the new suite. The Council continues to feed into and support the work at the Resilience Forum within the district, including our communities team supporting pop-up vaccination centres in areas where vaccine uptake is lower than elsewhere. As at this point, Chairman, I will pass over to Ryan, who will cover some specifics.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I'm just going to cover off a couple of the points which Mark sort of raised. So one around the gaps, that was just, it's quite clear in the report where they are, and we've set out why there are some gaps there. A lot of it was just due with the timescales of getting this report published after we got it agreed at Cabinet. Essentially, as Mark said, it made sense that we bring something today rather than sit on it until March, because ultimately our commitment is to try and bring these reports as soon after the quarter end as possible. The same applies to targets. As you'll see, in some areas we've spoken about targets needing to be baselined or targets not yet being agreed. That will be agreed when we bring this report back. That was just a timescales piece. And equally on some of that contextual information we've spoken about before, I'm aware of 2 bits in there around bins collected and planning extensions, which aren't included in the report. That's because I didn't have those at the time of publication. I will, of course, email the Scrutiny Committee afterwards with those, so you have them as a full suite. I'm obviously happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions from members of the committee? Tim.
Thank you. Some good news. Page 79. It's good to see that we're actually including our energy usage figures for the first time, and that's going to be useful in the future to hopefully see that reducing. My query would be about some of our high impact energy. Now, you've indicated here that we're not doing the leisure centres because they're falling to third parties, but in the Anomia report, climate report, that was quantified, the carbon impact there. So is there a reason that we cannot have some impact rating on those as well? And also with street lighting, I believe that figure is already available. It's already sent to me on a regular basis. So would that not be a very easy one to include in here? So on page 81, I am very pleased to see that we have met our legal obligation on response to FOI inquiries. and we have 100% success there. And now just a query on the complaints. You've said 98% responded in time, and that was out of 76 complaints. Now, when I was asking about this before, I requested that we actually produce the two numbers. So it's that would either be 74 out of 76 were completed in time, or possibly 75 out of 76, depending on how you round your percentages. And that was the reason I requested that we actually have the actual numbers, the quotient and the dividend in the ratio. So just a query on that one. Was it 74 or 75?
Thank you for your questions, Councillor. So on the street lighting and the leisure, I would have to clarify that with Greg, just because I don't know, but my understanding is the reason we've not included that information is around the third-party usage for leisure. On the point of FOIs, I believe it was 74. I will double check that and clarify that in my email to the committee once I've spoken to the statutory information officer, but that is my understanding.
Happy? Any other questions? Philip?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm pleased to see the energy figures there. I would just ask, and I appreciate you put these figures together in a timely fashion, if we could backdate the gas usage, electricity and water to Q3 2021 so we can see the trends that are developing.
Is that possible, Ryan?
Yeah, that's certainly something we can look at. I imagine that's something we can do. So that will be included for the reports moving forward. Like I said, when we spoke about gaps, there is just some because we haven't been able to backdate that data yet. For some, we won't be able to do it because we obviously weren't recording it. But for stuff like that, that's stuff we can certainly look at.
Tim, your ears pricked up.
Oh, it's just that I know that we've got the data, so that should be relatively easy to do.
Thank you. Any other questions on any bit of this report? Okay, thank you. Are Scrutiny content then to take that as noted? Thank you. Well, that was, you got off lightly there, Mark, this time, didn't you? They didn't dare want to spiel on Thetford, so. So that takes us to the tour de force that Councillor Sherwood is now going to give us under item 9, the sustainability programme update. I'm in your hands.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know you've been very keen for us to come, and I was concerned last night when I heard from my Assistant Director, Greg Pearson, that he was unwell. But I have, as I mentioned earlier, got with me today Steve James, the Executive Director, who will make the presentation. Both myself and Steve were gone through this presentation with Greg prior to today. We're happy to take any questions, and in a way I'm pleased that Steve is here. Many of you, all of you will know Steve, but I think this is a new opportunity because Steve is now the Assistant Director under which the sustainability policy falls with Greg Pearson. And I get the point and the frustration of some members in the fact that the climate change and the sustainability programme is important, and it's important for a lot of people, including members and the public. And it's not something that's crept up on the planet within 12 months. It's something that's been there for decades, and we're going to take decades to make sure we get it right. But we do want to get it right as soon as we can, and I totally get that. So I think with Steve now in the position that he is in, we will be able to have a new focus on the delivery. We have spent that early time, and I feel it was important, and I don't apologise for that. We have spent that early time in baselining and finding out exactly where we are as a council to make sure the projects we do. And one of the pressures I had put upon me when I was first given this role was the knowledge and experience from members and outside organisations. You have to listen to them to understand what effects certain changes will have. It's not simple. Tim will know that, others will know that. people with experience, and I've been really pleased with the way that that engagement has come forward. So I'm going to hand over to Steve James now. Steve will make the presentation. Steve and I will take questions and answer them as we can. And if they're more detailed than we can, we will get Greg to respond to them fully. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Steve.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, as Ian mentioned, unfortunately, Greg can't be here today. I was able to catch up with him just to talk through some points which he, of course, wanted me to pick out. And just to reiterate what Councillor Sherwood said, this agenda is new to me, but it's something which I'm very excited and enthused to be a part of, and look forward to moving it forwards and progressing our ambitions. So this indeed is the update, Breckland 2035, and the sustainability strategy. So what have we done? Well, the council has made a very public commitment to be net zero as an organisation by 2035, and that's something we should be proud of. And underpinning that commitment are three pillars, I guess, to help move the agenda forwards. We are looking to reduce our own impact, of course. Looking beyond our own boundaries, we're looking to influence behaviour change, and importantly, to enable others to take action. So what does that look like? Well, I guess in terms of enabling, the council allocated £100,000 for the delivery of a community green grant scheme. And this was to support our communities to take action themselves, to promote environmental sustainability and create positive behavioural change. And across Breckland, there were many applications sent in, and £98,000 or just over worth of grants was allocated, with 30 successful organisations. Some of the schemes are there. I won't go through them all, but these were community-led initiatives. In terms of our own buildings, of course, members will be familiar with the Work Smart programme and that priority that we have as well in our corporate plan. And through that, there have been improvements in lighting at Elizabeth House that will result in a reduction of 24.5 tonnes of carbon per annum. Members may also be aware that Greg and the team commissioned South East Energy Hub to deliver an initial high-level analysis on Elizabeth House that would help us to understand the viability of solar or indeed heating options. And going further than that, the team procured MPS property consultants to carry out a more detailed technical analysis to understand whether delivery is indeed possible at these sites, and looking, I guess, beyond solar and heating, but also on improved insulation options. And that is expected in March 2022, so March of this year. The important bit, as Councillor Sherwood mentioned, is this gives us an evidence base and an understanding of our own position that will enable us to move forwards and deliver a pipeline of projects, whether that be solar, whether that be insulation, to bid into future grant funding. So be able to use money that we've set aside to draw down additional money through match funding schemes. And will also enable us to have a detailed carbon reduction plan for our operational buildings. There's work that we've been doing to encourage the use of electric vehicles across the district. 4 additional charging points are to be delivered in Swaffham at the Theatre Street car park. There was a wider study undertaken of Breckland-owned car parks, which identified 7 potential sites for additional charging units across the district: Elizabeth House, Breckland House at Thetford, and potential charging points in Watton, of course. And through the Green Grant Scheme, which I mentioned earlier, we're enabling the delivery of 2 units at Croxton Village Hall, and we're working with other parish councils to help support them to deliver charging points in their parishes. One of the other pieces of work which Greg has been working on is working closely in partnership with the Woodland Trust, who have accessed and assessed, 8 sites owned by the council, of which 5 have been identified as suitable for planting. And to move this forward, 3 sites have been identified to be delivered by the end of March. So we will be looking to commence planting of trees at 3 sites in the district over the coming months. And we're also consulting with town councils and ward members and procuring a contractor to plant the trees and scrubs on site. So to really get on and get those trees planted whilst we've got the current window to do so. There's of course wider activity that has been going on or is planned to go on. We've delivered carbon literacy training to members, updated and continue to update our web pages to signpost residents to action they can take, fulfilling that enabling function and to influence the behaviour of others. We were part of the £250,000 Norfolk-wide bid to the Community Renewal Fund to commission feasibility studies to further decarbonise energy systems across Norfolk. And of course, in that supportive role, continue to provide advice and guidance to parish councils across a number of environmental projects to help them achieve their environmental ambitions. Members will of course know that Greg has been working on the draft carbon footprint for 2021 and developed being refined for publication in March. The carbon footprint for 21-22 is we are looking to publish in September of this year as well. And we continue to be an active member of the Norfolk Climate Change Partnership. So that is an overview of the current position in terms of the Breckland 2035 agenda. Again, apologies that I won't be able to answer those detailed questions, but of course we will take them and we will look to respond to you in a timely fashion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Questions from members? David, then Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just for clarity, from I'd be interested to know the 24.5 tonnes of saving. What does that represent as a percentage of the overall? Just to get a glimpse of how much that has actually impacted over the building as a whole. If you have that information or you can provide it, I think that would be very useful. And I'd also like if in the subsequent information, if you could just provide a list of those 8 sites that the Woodland Trust have identified in Breckland. I personally don't know what those 8 sites are. I'd be interested to know what the 8 sites are the Woodland Trust have identified. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Wilkinson, for your points there. Starting in reverse order, absolutely, I'm happy to supply you with details of the 8 sites. The reason there was a slight delay, I don't think you were at council last week. No, so I did touch on that, so that doesn't matter. So no, I'm happy to repeat that. So we've identified the 3 sites where the plant is going to start right now. And I thought it was important we spoke to the parishes involved and the ward members first. So we want them to know, and then that information will be out there for everybody. I didn't want the councils or the ward members to get it second hand, if you like. I wanted them to be first hand because it's in their patch. So, and then you'll have the full list. Carbon question. I don't know that percentage figure, but we'll get that answer for you.
Thank you. Tim?
Thank you. Yes, I make this point a number of times in that we sometimes confuse or conflate environmental and carbon issues. And I think we've done that a little bit again today. That the listing that we had in the presentation about the £100,000 grants, bat boxes are fantastic. I've got my own, love bats, but that doesn't help you save any carbon. So we do need to be clear on what money is being spent and for what purpose. If it's an environmental advantage, yeah, all in favour of it, but let's not try and pin that as part of our carbon reduction budget. You mentioned that March 2022, we're going to get the report for improvements of this building and what we can do to it, but have we got anything in the budget? Have we actually allocated stuff so that we can actually move that forward?
Ian.
As I think we explained in the earlier point that you raised, Councillor Burt, it's important that we know exactly what is required so we can budget and go ahead with those. We have set some money aside to make sure that these studies can be done, and there are grants available. So we will be working with partners to try and ensure that we can get that work done in a timely manner. So we're going to find out exactly where we are and move forward from that point.
Terry.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the presentation. Just a couple of points. Sitting as I do as a county councillor and also as a town councillor, increasingly over the last year, obviously, sort of green issues, if you like, are much more on the agenda now. And I've had debates at Norfolk here and at town council and various sort of community groups that I'm involved in about projects and initiatives to tackle climate change and improve biodiversity and all the rest of it. One thing I'm never really clear about is the level of partnership working and the sharing of ideas. I mean, this is opening up, you know, in the way that health and housing and other issues have developed over time to have processes for partnership working and the sharing of knowledge. There's a new opportunity with green projects, if you like. You mentioned a climate change partnership, a Norfolk climate change partnership, which is new to me. And I just wondered really to what extent we are working with, say, the county council and town and parish councils. For example, Norfolk County Council, I know as a member, I've just purchased 60 fruit trees through my local member budget. And they've encouraged county councillors to do that because obviously there's greater buying power. To what extent are district councils and others doing the same? Because if we all buy together and we buy solar panels together or insulation or whatever. So that partnership working for me is quite key, and also the sharing of ideas, because I find certainly sitting at county, somebody has a bright idea over here, and then maybe 6 months later, somebody has an idea over here, and actually we could be, you know, more collective and work together. The other point is around trees, and forgive me, Ian, I've made this point before. I'm all in favour of planting new trees, but their benefit is delayed in a sense. They take a while to establish and get going. What concerns me greatly is our maintenance and care for our existing stock of trees. My ward is named after trees. You know, there's Ash Close and Elm Road and also, you know, Elm House is on Elm Road. Because of the variety of trees that there are in Thetford, we're not short of trees. But I find we're quite harsh as a council in our maintenance of them, in our pruning. You know, often we'll cut them back as much as we possibly can, so we ain't got to come back for a long while to do some more, or rip them out completely. And I worry that actually an awful lot of people these days, the cost and the hassle of maintaining trees is an issue, it is a concern. But I would much rather us be more sympathetic and look after our existing stock of trees and hedgerows and the rest of it, as well as planting lots of nice new ones. I've seen dozens of trees in my ward go completely from Breckland Land because of maintenance issues, sometimes disease. But I would want to see us put more money into the maintenance of existing, as well as planting lots of nice new ones.
Like a dog out of the traps.
Yeah. I'm so pleased that Terry has given me this opportunity, because I think we've got good news on this for you, Terry. We're going to agree on something. How about that? I think that's good news. You're absolutely right. Partnership work is key, and not only on the climate agenda, but across all types of things. But we are well on the case for this one. So the partnership that was referred to is an officer group across the county of district officers, county officers at a senior level who meet. But I was very keen that it had a member input. So very shortly, there will be a member panel from all the districts and the county to match that. So we'll be there making sure that we're sharing that learning and that experience. But even better than that, I was very clear with our team that we are not the experts. We've got some very good people. Both Greg and Michelle are from UEA and have environmental qualifications. But I wanted to make sure that we were doing the right thing, which leads into the trees. So what we're doing is we're setting up a partnership panel with those organisations that will meet, not monthly, to share those ideas and give us a reality check, if you like. They're the experts. These are people like the Woodland Trust, the Norfolk Wildlife Trust, other organisations who will be inviting to come together so that we make the best use of any funds that we're spending. We get the best knowledge and experience. And what I've found is you're absolutely right about the public being passionate about this, and towns and parish councils also. Greg and I and the leader and the chief executive, we've been invited to numerous organisations, some of which I didn't know existed, but are doing fantastic work. We actually went to one a couple of weeks ago. They're a private group of individuals who are coming up with a great project in the middle of Breckland. They're going to talk about that more and launch that more in March. So organisations like that will be involved and will be able to come together so that this is what we're thinking of doing. These are the ideas we've got. We can bring that together so that we're not in a silo atmosphere. And as far as the Woodland Trust and the trees are concerned, the grants that Woodland Trust can give and what we've been helping and we want to do more is if the town and parish councils are not familiar with that system, we can help them with that. And I mean, some of the schemes, they pay for 75% of the cost. And we can either manage that and help that with contractors to put the trees in or work with volunteer groups to do that. And the Woodland Trust, you finally talked about our trees, so I'm now going on to that. Canopy cover is the thing that the Woodland Trust really started when they had their first conversation with us. So canopy cover is really important, and Terry's right, it's not just about new trees. They all have to start somewhere. From an acorn, a great oak does grow, and they take hundreds of years. But a tree has a life expectancy. Everything has a life. So some do have to be removed. Some will fail through health issues with the tree. So we're going to manage that, and we will make sure that we understand the whole canopy. And I don't want to overpraise the Woodland Trust, but the work that they do and the expertise they've brought to us and the knowledge they've brought to us has really been incredibly helpful. So I believe, Councillor Jeremy, all of what you have raised, we're on the case with. And I hope you'll see that as positive, but I'm happy to take any other points. I was a bit excited about that because I like to have a question where we're ahead of the game slightly.
You're ahead of the game on everything, surely.
I hope so, Rodri, but I can't promise that. I can't promise that.
Thank you. Peter, then David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I haven't got a question. I'd just like to say how impressed I was with that presentation and the hard work what's gone into it by Councillor Sherwood and his team, Greg and Michelle. I think we're leading the way across the districts in Norfolk. I haven't seen anything else from anybody, any other districts. What we're doing, we're ahead of the game, and it has got to be a gradual thing. You know, we possibly need to link up with the government, but government sometimes are going back and saying their targets are not realistic, but we're pushing on with our own project, and the green grants, as I've in my wards have educated people. Actually, they've thought, oh, hang on a minute, you know, and this is that's brought it to the forefront. And consequently, if some of the grants were given to us in Narborough, actually, the parish council picked up on that and acquired 105 trees from the Woodland Trust, which I was one of 4 people planting them one windy, wet Sunday morning. But we're going in the right direction, I believe, and we're leading the way, I think, in Norfolk.
Ian, then David, then Linda.
I'm going to be brief. I'm going to be brief, Mr. Chairman, because I know how you upset my colleague and he's gone.
He's left.
Thanks, Peter, for highlighting that. And I just want to go back to a point that Councillor Burt said as well, and it's important. Those of us with knowledge, and I've gained knowledge over the 18 months to 2 years on this subject more than I had. It was something that I cared about. And Councillor Burt said, you know, you've got to realise that environmental schemes aren't necessarily carbon reduction schemes. And I totally get that. So a bat box isn't going to reduce the carbon of the area or the country. But what Peter has highlighted is that scheme, and when I went to that scheme, and I was delighted to be able to go to Peter's ward and give that award, is the public don't necessarily have that degree of understanding either. But through the schemes, you enable to raise awareness of the environment, raise awareness of the issue with carbon and climate change, and it does all come together. So, you know, I just want to say that the Green Grant scheme is important, doesn't necessarily, an individual project doesn't necessarily reduce carbon, but it's an important part of the whole scheme. When we talked about education earlier, and we talked about food reduction, this all comes together. Everything that you are touching, everything that you're using has some kind of environmental impact, and the public are getting that, and we're enabling to understand that better.
David, then Linda.
Thank you, Chair. I don't, far be it from me to introduce any negativity into our debate, because I'm a great supporter of everything we're doing. However, I'm just wondering whether we can use what we're doing under Councillor Sherwood to try and improve our liaison and relationship with the Forestry Commission. In Swaffham, we had a situation where a landowner obtained a license from the Forestry Commission to remove a large number of trees, mature trees with canopies. We as a council were informed via our tree officer that this was happening, but as a ward, we had no idea what was going on. And it distressed me when I made some inquiries on this and got a copy of the license from the Forestry Commission, that the landowner was given 10 years to replace those trees. And if he hadn't done it within 10 years, then he had another year. So effectively he had 11 years to replace these trees. It was of great concern to many of the residents who happen to use that particular part of Swaffham for walks and so on and so forth. And I'm just wondering whether we can use our climate change targets and everything else that we're working on very effectively, and I endorse everything that's been said, to try and build some relationship with the Forestry Commission themselves, so that we are at least aware in advance of what might be going on, rather than to be on the back end of it. And many trees have been actually felled as a result. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Wickerson, for raising that point. I think through the climate and sustainability agenda, that has meant that we are having more of those conversations, and we are engaging with and continue to engage with the Forestry Commission. We always did to a degree as a council, but certainly on this level. If I can go into that particular issue, because you know it was a concern for the ward, it's my ward as well. From the democratic point of view, because under my portfolio, democratic services also falls, I was concerned at the way that was done, and I've asked officers to ensure that when those kind of notifications come through from the Forestry Commission, that is spread. But to go into that one particularly, we could make comments, which we did make, and if you've seen that license, you'll see we did respond with comments as a council. But for clarity, this is a licensing issue with the Forestry Commission, so the landowner went through the right process. He was given that license by the experts, which is the Forestry Commission, so that was followed. But that goes down the line again of, I understand residents' concern when you see a large quantity of trees and a large canopy area felled like that. But those kind of works will happen and will be part of management of the Forestry Commission and landowners, and we will be able to make comment and be involved as we can. But as a district council, there was no, we couldn't stop it happening, and in fact, it would have been good for the parish to understand that before, I accept that, but again, the parish wouldn't have been able to influence that license or decision. That's a purely a Forestry Commission statutory license that is issued, and they do happen across the district. I think probably when they happen in more rural settings, that might not be as obvious. People don't necessarily understand it. And there were residents who contacted me, probably the same contact who contacted you, some who were concerned, but others who said, you know, they had asked for some tree reduction there because of overhanging of properties and that. So it's always, we've heard earlier, you know, where trees are removed because when they get to a certain size, they are a risk to property. So some residents down there had specifically approached the landowner, were concerned about overhanging and falling trees. And I know a great proportion of the trees, this isn't me trying to be quick, a great proportion of the trees were ash, and there were some dieback issues which led to falling limbs off the trees. So yeah, the answer is we are making sure we engage with people like the Forestry Commission to get those things out there.
Linda.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm delighted to hear from Ian that there's going to be some member input through a panel. Can we have a mechanism where us as ward members can feed back into you or whoever all the schemes that are going on around Breckland? Just in our patch, we've had hundreds of trees planted by the school, including a royal oak that was given to us from Sandringham. We have at our recreation ground. We're working with the parochial church council to rewild the churchyard. So there's all these little schemes going on, which each in their own way, and it's not all about trees, it's about some open land and wetlands, etc., etc. I know Mr. Banbridge would be banging on with that if he was here, bless him. I think it's important we feed all that information somewhere so that there's a running total of this is what Breckland are achieving. So if you can come up with a mechanism for that, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Turner, for that. You're absolutely right. I mean, the fantastic thing is that since we've been doing this, is we've had numerous invites and have gone to organisations and spoken. And just I put that offer out there again to organisations who may be watching or through the ward members. If you have groups, I'm going to a group in a couple of weeks' time. We've been to other groups across Breckland, and I can go along with the officer and explain what we're doing and talk about that. But the information, I think ward members play a key role in this, in letting us know and being that interaction between their communities and what Breckland is doing. Councillor Wickerson did that perfectly. I told him off a bit because he got a couple of grants through the green grant system in his, but he worked with his communities, understood what they wanted, and worked with that and made that happen. And lots of councillors across the district did that. So recording that information and making sure we understand that is definitely something amongst those three pillars when we spoke at the beginning about, you know, educating others and allowing them to be able to do these kind of projects, because it is something people care about passionately. So yes, I'll look into that, Councillor Turner, and see what we can do to make it more accessible. The green grants, just talking about accessibility, there's a map on the website and you can see an interactive map where the green grants were awarded and find out more information about the projects they went to. So we could probably look to see if we could include other information.
Fabian.
Yeah, mine's just for information because I'm only aware of this because it covers my county council patch, but the Woodland Trust are in the process of purchasing 300 acres of what I would call fairly prairie style farmland in Thompson, and they're going to take that back and create more broadleaf woodland. But more importantly, as far as me, because it's not just that total mix, the Woodland Trust, they do appreciate wood pasture, everything else, but it's deciduous because obviously we've only got to drive through. We do have our fair share of conifers in Breckland, and it's deciduous to create that added biodiversity. That will also include about 1.5 miles of hedgerows being reinstated. And just for other people's factual notes when it comes back to it, within Breckland, this is where I get particularly sad, but since the 1920s, we have lost over 1,000 acres of parkland due to country houses being demolished or sold up and done. And that is where we have lost, shall we say, diversity, not only from the green point of view, carbon capturing, because it is historic grassland, which is not, sprayed and done off. So there's a huge area and a big loss to wildlife.
Thank you. Philip, then Tim.
Thank you, Chairman. Last year, about this time, we had a report from Eunomia, which came up with some key actions. And I wonder if you could update us on one in particular, which was suggesting that we should communicate with neighbouring councils to assess the possibility of establishing a power purchase agreement.
I haven't got the answer to that one, Philip, and I will get you the answer unless Steve has it. I know we spoke to other councils, but I haven't got an answer on how far that got. So let me find that out for you and come back.
Thank you. Tim.
Mine's one a little bit of process, Chairman. As Philip alluded to, we had the Eunomia report, and at that time it was said that we would have an annual update. So it's not unexpected at this time, because it was a year ago that we would be receiving that. This agenda item was on the work programme back in December as a sustainability programme update, but we hadn't actually had anything to prepare for this part of the agenda. It's just turn up on the day and the presentation is whatever the presentation is. And I'm concerned that this has happened a few times, that we're actually not being given the information ahead of time to be able to prepare properly and ask questions appropriately.
Your view is duly noted, and I was promised by Greg, but I think probably illness took him, that the presentation would be circulated in advance of this meeting. But no doubt on the next one, I'm sure that will be ensured. Thank you. One question and one challenge from me. The question is, so I think Steve alluded to in his presentation, there is going to be the report produced in March. And my understanding is that's the carbon footprint of all of the Breckland assets that the council holds, and presumably includes wholly owned limited company activities as well, or not sure, but yeah. And I suppose my question is, because we discussed this last year, will it break out the carbon versus the non-carbon but greenhouse effects, so methane, CFCs, hopefully none of those anymore, but other non-methane greenhouse gases as their impacts as well, or is it just carbon focused? And again, I'm very happy for you to come back to me if that's a great question. And then my challenge is, or my question is, some councils are aiming for 2030. We're aiming for 2035. Do you see a world in which Breckland outperforms and targets 2030 at some point, ideally before 2030?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And can I say, to start with, how grateful I am to be here, how much I've enjoyed it, and you can hold my feet to the fire next time, Tim. If you don't get your report in advance, I'll hide in another room and won't come in. So there's a challenge for Greg and my team. You will have it in advance. To go back to your point, your first point, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure of the breakdown of the figures there. I'll find that out and you'll get that answer. Now I've forgotten what the other bit was.
So there was the breakdown of different greenhouse gas contributions, and then there was 2030.
Yeah,
versus 2035.
yeah, 2035. When we first looked at that, the actual government target is 2050. And other councils have gone for 2030 and anywhere between 2030 and 2050. We were keen not to use offsetting to avoid that if at all possible. And I know Tim's going to challenge me on that. He doesn't want it to happen at all. I don't want it to happen at all, Councillor Burt. So to avoid offsetting, You can achieve a net zero as an organisation quicker through doing that. I don't know if some councils are taking that option by going to 2030. They're going to use offsetting to do that. People have different views. I mean, my choice, I can only have oil heating at home. I can't have gas, oil. I can have other suitable modern appliances when I can afford to install them. So I choose to offset my oil because that is my easy answer now to get rid of my guilt, if you like. But as a council, we wanted to ensure that we were doing real things and making real changes in our organisation. So the reason 2035 was chosen was because we believe, as an organisation, my officers believe that we can get to net zero by 2035. Could it come forward? I would like to think that future councils could bring that forward. I won't be here. I'll probably be too old. I'll probably still be alive, so they'll probably be able to wheel me in when we get to net zero in 2035. But I would certainly hope that councils of the future, including this council, will have an ambition to bring that forward and achieve it sooner. So yes, we could bring it forward. We could achieve it sooner, but we've set ourselves a realistic, achievable target, and I think that's important. There's no point in missing the target. I'd rather be ahead of it than behind it.
Thank you. And just in case you think retirement will save you, you'll be aware this committee has the power to summon anyone from anywhere in the country to attend our meetings to provide evidence. So no doubt we'll be asking you back in 2035. Peter.
Yeah, just to, what's the word I'm looking for? To pacify possibly Ian, that numbers, figures, dates, years, the world is still going to evolve with or without us. So don't worry too much.
I'm sure Ian finds that extremely relieving. Any other final questions on this item, David?
Thank you, Chair. It's not directly linked to the work that's going on at the moment, but just to make members aware, if they're not already aware, that there is an air quality management report for Breckland, which was issued in July last year, and is particularly relevant to the market towns in terms of the quality of the air in the towns. That is available if anybody wants to have a look at that. It's quite a lengthy document, but it is of interest, particularly to those members from the market towns. And that is available via Democratic Services if anybody wishes to have a copy of it, if it hasn't already been. I don't think it's been widely circulated to all members, but you can get a copy if you'd like to do that. I think that's important. Thank you.
Thank you. Go on, Peter.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, what Councillor just mentioned, that did come from a task and finish group, which was chaired by myself from this commission a few years ago, and we had to put that for DEFRA. So that report has come from originally what we started here as task and finish group.
Thank you. Are the committee happy to note this update then? Thank you. Item 10 is task and finish groups. As you know, last meeting we stood up the Serco task and finish group, and I invite the now chairman of that task and finish group to provide an update.
Thank you, Chairman. So the chairman, Rodri, and I have met with key officers to confirm the purpose and the desired outcome of the task and finish group as outlined in the now confirmed minutes of the ONS Commission. We've agreed there'll be a maximum of 6 meetings, approximately 6 weeks apart, to allow for officers to carry out necessary work, culminating in a summary of work undertaking and recommended outcomes going forward. We agreed that the first meeting of the task and finish group should include the presentation given earlier to ONS members previously to explain the new Serco contract and to agree the parameters of the task and finish group. So that covered 3 areas: to scrutinise the current performance of the Serco contract, to examine the impact of COVID and the national supply chain issues on the mobilisation of the contract and to examine the governance arrangements in place to manage and monitor the contract. The first meeting has been arranged for the 23rd of February at 2 o'clock in the Woodpecker Room, and members of the Task and Finish group have been advised of that date and venue, and an agenda will be sent out in compliance with agenda protocols. Where considered necessary or appropriate by the members of the Task and Finish group, other professionals will be invited to participate and to attend the final meeting prior to the report being written and presented to the Commission later in the year. Serco and the responsible Cabinet member contract managers would also be invited to attend Overview and Scrutiny Commission when the report is presented. And of course, the meeting will be open to the public unless we need to go below the line for any issue.
Thank you. Are there any questions on that update? Seeing none, thank you very much. Item 11 is outside body feedback. Do any members have any outside body feedback they want to bring to the Commission's attention? Terry?
I don't have one because I don't think I'm on any, but I do have a request under this item, Chair. We send a representative, do we not, to the Norfolk Police and Crime Panel. We have very good updates from the QEH and the Health Overview and Scrutiny, but I don't recall ever having an update on what the Norfolk Police and Crime Panel do. And I just wonder if maybe, sort of skipping ahead maybe to the work programme, some years ago, we invited representatives from the police, I think at the time they called it like the Breckland Commander or something of the police, to address the Commission. And I'm just wondering, it's been a long while since we've looked at that, and I wonder if we maybe could combine the two and look at, what the panel is up to in relation to the Police Commissioner, but also, more on the ground here in Breckland about the police, because, it's been a year now since the police closed a lot of their public facing access in the district. The Thetford reception closed and PCSOs have gone and the rest of it. So I would certainly appreciate a bit of an update on that.
Thank you, Terry. That was solidly under item 14, but you've said it now. Any other outside body feedback? No, thank you. Item 12 is scrutiny call-ins. There have been none. Item 13 is councillor calls for action. I have been made aware of none. Item 14 is the work programme. We've just had a very eloquently put point around policing crime. I think that would be an excellent idea if the Commission agree. So if we could, so actually just in terms of detail then, would you be looking, because there's a chairman of the Norfolk Police and Crime Panel, obviously we've got the Police Commissioner and we've got the Chief Constable. Are you looking for the full caboodle, or are you looking to focus on a particular subset of that?
I must confess my ignorance, because I don't actually know who the Breckland rep is on the Police and Crime Panel. So it would be useful if we got an update from them on what's been going on over the last year. But I always believe in aiming high, Chairman, so try and get whoever you can.
Very good. I'm reliably informed that Gordon, one of our most regular attendees, is our representative on that. So no doubt he can give us an update at the next meeting, and then we can try and get the proper inquisition done later in the year. So yes, we'll add that to the work programme. Are there any other items? So I'm just scrolling to it. Any other items that members would like to suggest before we review what we currently have before us? Not seeing any hands. So it's very small on my screen. So one of the things I added, which we've already alluded to, is once we've published the carbon footprint report in March, I would like to invite Ian back. I know he enjoys being here, so I don't want him to have too long a break before we bring him back. So if you're expecting that in March, do you think April will be sufficient for you to be? Yeah, okay, so we can pencil that in for April. Similarly, looking at 2022, you'll have another report in September. So would October be okay to discuss that? Very good. We can't do anything on ban and poultry, as I've just updated on that. We've got the plan to invite the Anglia Water and UK Power Networks representatives. I think that would be good in May and or July if possible. We've got empty properties. Again, subject to what Alison says, it would be good to have that probably in May, looking at what we've got in front of us. Review of IT infrastructure, which Councillor Burt requested a little while ago. I think the time is soon for that to come to us. So I'm thinking July or September, if we could have a report brought on that. It's been a little while since we had our last outage, so hopefully there'll be nothing bad in the interim. Fabian, did you wave or did you just scratch your head? Very good. Okay, that's fine. I'm attuned to micro movements in members. So I think that probably puts us where we've only got one item for March at the moment. So does anyone want to suggest anything they'd like alongside the housing forward plan? No? Shall I go away and think about it? And I'll just email you guys later. Okay, all right, fine. See how it is. All right, good. Well, that is that, which takes me to the last agenda item. It's not very straightforward, this system. Which is next meeting. So the date of the next meeting is March on the 10th. And I look forward to seeing everyone there if no one has any final comments before I close the meeting. Seeing none, thank you very much for coming and have a good